Okay, now get this. This serpent is called a seraphim nakash, a fiery serpent in the scriptures, in the sense of its fiery appearance. Now, if you think about what color fire is, we'll say red or orange. It's a coppery color. And a lot of times you find God, you find Christ standing in visions that John and different ones had, and it says that they had a coppery loin. His loin area was coppery. His feet were like copper. His appearance was like copper. So even God had that coppery essence about him. So it makes me wonder if Satan was at one time a cherubim, a protective angel, and he was beautiful. It makes me wonder, did he have something about his appearance that was a coppery appearance? And when he lost, and this is what I believe, I'm not telling you this is what Scripture says, but it hints at it. But I believe that Satan, excuse me, there's a bug on me. I believe that Satan had a beautiful coppery appearance, because we know he was beautiful according to the Scriptures. He had gems all over his body. He had bezels, which is a lot of people think it's a musical instrument. The bezel is something, it's like in a ring. The little prongs that hold the stone in that ring, that's what a bezel is. He had bezels all over his body, and those bezels held jewels of all kinds. He was beautiful, but I believe he had a coppery appearance. And when he fell, he lost that coppery appearance. And Satan wanted that back. He wanted that beautiful appearance back. But, you know, he wasn't going to get it back. And I believe that's the tie somehow between all the people at the mounds and the copper. I believe that's where it ties in, if you see the correlation. We were talking about the copper, the serpents, and we're going to talk about standing stones, pillars, and groves. 2 Kings 18, verse 4 says, He removed the high places and broke the images and cut down the groves and broke in pieces the copper serpent that Moses had made. For unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it, and he called it Nehushtan, or the copper serpent. What was a high place? Now, when the Bible talked about high places, we want to talk about what they were, and it'll bring all of this into focus about why I've been doing this here at these mounds, why I've been teaching at the mounds. It'll bring all of that into focus. But what was a high place? A high place could be a real mountain or a built-up mountain where they worship their idols. It's called Bama or Bema in the scriptures, meaning to be high. Now, what was an image? In Hebrew, it's the word matseba. It means pillar, but was a standing stone or a pillar. But not just a pillar, a memorial stone, a station stone, a column, a standing image, an idol. And it could also be one stone, or it could be many. And if you remember back when Jacob was running from his brother, thought he was going to kill him, he went to Bethel, which means house of God. And at Bethel, he laid his head down on a pillar. A pillar, it was a matseba. It was one of the standing stones that had been used in either a temple to God or a temple to one of the gods, like Baal and Ishtar and some of those. Not necessarily them, but, you know, to another god besides the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so that night he dreamed a dream. He used that pillar as his pillow and slept on it, and that night he dreamed a dream, and God appeared to Jacob that night, and he wrestled with the angel. And so anyway, what was a grove? It's called Asherah in Hebrew, or Asherah, and it was a tree or trees, or groves of carved trees, or a grove of carved pillars, or a grove of carved standing stones, or it could be one standing stone, but most of the time it was a grove of them. Many times they were carved, the idols were carved into them, whether they be trees, whether they be made out of stone, or whatever, and they were placed a lot of times on these mountains, or they were placed in a field or somewhere to honor their gods. But notice first in the scripture it says he removed the what? He removed the high places. In other words, he tore down their mounds, he tore down their hills, tore down their high places where they were worshiping these idols. And it's the word Bama or Bema. Now, I don't know if Bema started out the way that it's understood in New Testament times or not, but even in the Greek, Bema is used to represent like in churches, pulpit stands and things like that. It's called, in the synagogue, it's called a Bema or Bama. And they would go up to it and they would read the Torah scroll and I don't know where that idea of using that for that came from, but nonetheless, it's just to indicate that it's something higher, to put you above, a little bit above everybody else, where you can be seen. But that's also what they were back then. They were put in a high so that they could be seen, so that their worshipers would know where to go. That's only part of the reason, though. But notice first it says, he removed the high places. Let's see. In Isaiah chapter 60, Jesus was called to the bema. And I'm not comparing what Jesus did or how he read it there. I'm just wanting you to get an understanding that a bema or bama is a high place. It's something built up to be high where it can be seen. But he was called up to the bema to read Isaiah 60. But it could have been used this way in Kings that we just read from as well. But it's more likely that's in reference to a mountain or a built up place where they worship their idols, because we do know they worship them on mountains. And so my understanding from the Bible and research is when they didn't have a mountain, they made an artificial mountain, which is exactly what a mound is. It's an artificial mountain. And the thing is, that idea spread all over the world. You find mounds all over the world, not just in Israel, not just in the Middle East, but all over the world. You find standing stones, not just in Israel, although I've seen a good many in Israel. You find them all over the world. Although they may have had one of these at their mountain as well, the standing stones where they worship their idols, but they preferred mountains. They preferred mountains over the mounds. But if not, they would build one and get as high as possible. Now, it talks about him putting their images there, or them putting their images there. And we talked about that being a matzeva, a pillar, a standing stone, and how that they'd carve their images on them, and how that they would worship their idols there. And it was mostly, excuse me, mostly wood, but it could be stone. And in Israel, there wasn't a whole lot of wood, so they used stone a lot. It's kind of like a Gilgal Rephaim in Israel. They have round circular stones, or the stones piled in circles, and I can't remember, 5 or 6. And in the very center is a cairn, or what looks like a burial place. In our area in Alabama, there's an area on the military area where they have a rock effigy, and it looks like a serpent. And I believe back quite a few years ago, somebody went up there with a machine and tore up the tail part of it. But I've never been able to go see it because it's out on military property, or military, what do you call it? And I don't even really know exactly where it's at, but I have seen pictures of it, and people have gone up there, and so it's pretty interesting. So we have so many rocks in our area. I could see back there them building an effigy, which now I know in one area of where I live, there's a mound, and they took some of the rocks from one of the areas where there was an effigy and put them together, and so I've been out there. But anyway, the grove was called an Asherah, as I said, and it could be made from a tree, it could be plain, it could be carved, it could be placed in the ground in a standing position, or they could use groves of trees, or they could cut the trees down and make like groves. Everybody's seen Stonehenge just about. I mean, they may not have been there, but they've seen pictures of Stonehenge just about. So when you get the idea of Stonehenge, this is kind of what the Bible is talking about that they would do. They would take the stones, or they would take the trees, and do them similar to something like that, just to let you get an understanding. This was going on during the time of the Bible, and we know that because archaeologists have dated these places that old. Like we were looking at one the other day, and I told Diane, I said, this is from the time of Abraham, but it was poverty points where it was. And I said, this was at the same time that Abraham was on the earth and walking around, but just in a different place. Okay, in Exodus 24, Moses built an altar under the hill and had 12 matzeva, or pillars, erected to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. But he didn't do it for worship. He did it because God told him to place 12 pillars there to remember how that when they crossed over the Jordan River into the land of Canaan, that it represented each tribe there. And a lot of these cults, when they worshipped these other gods, they would have sexual orgies. I know this being pretty blunt, but that's what they did. And they were there to honor their gods in this immoral way. Sacrifices would also be made at these places, maybe children or even virgin girls or different ones. There's a place called Tel Balata, and there's a matzeba or a pillar there at the ancient site of Shechem in Israel, which is a sanctified standing stone of the type common in the Canaanite places of worship. It's on top of an ancient massive temple to the god Bet Baal Berit, which means house of the God of the covenant. But this could also have been the stone set up by Joshua. They don't really know for sure. They do know there was a temple there to this god, this particular god. But Joshua also set up the stone, so they don't really know how old this stone is. Because I'm told you can't carbon date stones, and then I've heard other people say, yeah, you could. But mostly what I've heard is no, you can't. So I don't think they really know exactly how old it is. But it could have been confiscated from a temple of Baal or something and set up there, so nobody really knows for sure. But there actually is one at Shechem, which is a place Joshua set up a standing stone, and it was pointing to God, or it was about God. But these were supposed to represent the divine. An archaeologist by the name of Selin in the late 20s dug this particular area, and it was told that his successor got very angry because it might have been the stone of Joshua, and he broke it and threw it into the dump nearby. And so the one that came after him, the archaeologist after him, was very upset with him because he had broken this stone and just threw it in the dump. And but it was later restored, but no one knew for sure exactly where it had been when he found it, because he didn't even draw a diagram of it. But no, it says his reports burned up during World War II, so that's why. But anyway, but this wasn't the only pillar or matzeba that they found there. It was just the biggest one. And the wall built to nearby this now had cyclopean stones. I mean, it had huge stones in this wall. The stones were so big that, just to give you an example, everybody's heard of a cyclop. You know, the one-eyed cyclop. Just to give you an example, they say a cyclop would have had to move this stone because it was so big. In other words, a giant would have had to move it. So anyway, we're going to stop right there, and the next time we're going to get on altars, images, and idol worship. Thanks for watching, and I pray you be blessed. Okay, Deuteronomy 12, 2 and 3. You shall utterly destroy all the places where the nations which you shall possess serve their gods, on the high mountains, and on the hills, and on every green tree, and you shall overthrow their altars, and break their pillars, that's the image, and burn their groves, the Asherah. And that word Asherah also comes from the word Ashtaroth, or Ishtar. You shall burn them with fire, and you hew down the graven images of their gods, and destroy the names of them out of that place. Now, altar, as I said before, is the word, no, I didn't tell you about the altar. The altar is the word mizbeach, and it means altar because it comes from the word zebach in Hebrew, which means to slaughter. The mem in front of the word means from, so it's from slaughter, showing it's an altar. Pestle is an engraved or a carved image. It was engraved in the tree, or the historical evidence shows that it was, they also used stones to carve them in, but that's what the word pestle means. So when he's saying here, you shall hew down their graven images and destroy the names of them out of that place. See, they had their names, or they had the pictures of their gods on these stones or on these trees carved into them, and so God wanted them to destroy the names of them out of the place. He wanted the names just totally obliterated. He wanted any symbol of them obliterated. Apparently they must have had their names placed there too. Now, as I said, altar is the word mizbeach, and it means altar because it comes from the word zebach, which means to slaughter. In this case, the serpent on the pole had been set up in a high place, and they had made a grove to it, and they were offering incense to it. And the telling part of this verse is it was called an ekushtan, which is copper serpent. This is from the same area and has the same root as all the other words that I mentioned earlier about Nakash the serpent. coming on down. It also basically means copper or coppery serpent. Now, since they had come from Egypt, they had the mindset about Apophis or Apep and his power, and so I believe they were worshiping this, as I said before, this serpent on the pole as Apep, the Egyptian god. This thing that Moses made on the pole was never meant to be worshipped. It was never meant to be worshipped. It was only for their healing at the time. But this had been going on for some time, probably hundreds of years. So Nakash, the serpent, and Nakoshet, the copper color, and Nehushtan, the copper serpent, they're all connected. All these things are connected. And this is what I've been trying to show for the last 2 or 3 lessons, that copper and serpent are connected. Did they really realize who they were worshiping when they worshiped this thing? If you don't think you've ever seen a high place, and that they were not all destroyed under Joshua. They were not destroyed under Joshua. Example, case in point. Diane, point to the mountain. Case in point. They were not all destroyed. They began to make them all over the world. And even the archaeologists, even the scientists will tell you these were high places for worship. Can't say that this particular one was, but that's what the mounds were created for. They were made to be high places where they could worship their gods. And as I said again, what are high places? Groves, standing stone. Let's take a look at places the world over that were and now are high places. For example, Etowah Indian Mounds in Cartersville, Georgia. I visited this site. It had 3 original mounds. It's an amazing place, but it's high places. It's nothing more than that. And I'll be showing some pictures on this of some high places, and as well as these that we've been to. You've seen them. It rang home that the mounds originated from the high places of the Bible and continue to this day. And the mound site at Etowah goes back to 1000, 1500 AD. And then you've got like the one we went to the other day, Poverty Point, which goes back 3,000 years to 2100 BC, which was around the time of Abraham. So literally, you have all over the world mounds. You have Stonehenges that go way back 2, 3, 4,000 years to the time that the Bible talks about. They had to come from a familiar beginning. They had to come from an original point at some time. People all over the world didn't just have this thought, at the same time, we're going to build these things. No, it come from somewhere. This idea came from somewhere. And I believe this idea came from the high places that the Bible tells us about. They worship their idols there. They place their idol groves there. They place their idols there. And if the archaeologists and the scientists will be honest, they don't know who built them. They named these places after people who owned the land there at one time, maybe in the 17 or 1800s, or even the 1900s. They don't know who these people were. They don't know what their names were. They're saying the Indians, but a lot of the Indian tribes will say, we don't have any history of some of these places. We don't have any history of us building these things. Now, some of them, yes, because like I've said before, some of them are copycats. If you take the ones from AD 1000 and on up, closer to our time, they're copycats. They copied from the idea from further back. It came from way further back. And a lot of them had temples on them for sure. They found numerous, as I said before, copper tools, weapons, decorative copper plates. And so that goes back to where I said the copper is tied in with them. Because the Bible calls statues idols, so that's what they were. And we have the Cahokia mounds. I've seen them, and I've seen the little Lucifer effigy pipe that they have, they call it. It's the largest site in the United States. And they were there around the same period as Etowah's mound. Okay, until I decide exactly how I'm going to go forward with this, I'm going to stop right here because there's a lot to talk about, and I think I'm going to probably cover it somewhere else in another time, but I'll continue it from this point on. But thank you for watching, and be blessed.